All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and, in fact, available wherever you get your podcasts, including the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell for notifications, and, of course, upvote the video itself and comment down below. We're here with Daylan Flowers. He was at the open scrimmage on Saturday. He has all the particular information that you would need to use. Now, full disclosure to everybody watching this, I intentionally avoided practice reports after the practice. Intentionally avoided that. Now, I wanted to get a fresh perspective coming in because you know our channel is all about commentary and perspectives. This is a new perspective to the channel. Daylan Flowers. How you doing, Daylan?
I'm doing good, Mr. Willis. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing quite well indeed. Now, first off, how hot was it in the stadium?
It was pretty bearing. So they went out on social media and had fans enter through gate 33, and that's the side where the press box is, where it says home of the Ole Miss Rebels, and the sun was blazing right on us. I particularly went up to the top of the stadium to kind of avoid the sun, to kind of get out of the blaring, but the sun was beaming. But it was windy, though. It was still cool outside, but the sun was definitely beaming. It was pretty cold. It was kind of hot, but the wind was blowing, so it was decent.
Okay. Yeah, I remember whenever I was the video coordinator there, and I am completely familiar with the area that you were because whenever we practiced in the stadium on the sideline, I was up there in that camera path. And in the spring, it's kind of a mixed bag. You know, it can be cold, it can be miserable, and then all of a sudden
Yes,
it's like,
sir.
what is going on? The variance of it is just absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, well, before we get started, you know, let's just jump straight into it. The quarterback competition going on at Ole Miss. What is your first take seeing the lives of the three quarterbacks at Ole Miss?
Stephen, the competition is real. They all look pretty well, to be honest. And I remember you talked about recently how weird the quarterback position looked last year during the spring. But the three guys all look ready. They all have flaws in different ways, but they look ready, and the competition is real. Walker Howard you can see he lacks experience, but I tell you what, Stephen, his arm, I could tell you, his arm, he could be drafted in the first round of the NFL right now just based off his arm talent. His arm was strong, it was accurate, and he moved pretty well in the pocket. He lacked kind of seeing what was going on with the safeties and how they were playing in the outfield, but Walker's arm is really, really good. Spencer Sanders, he moved really well to avoid pressure from the defense. He avoided a lot of sacks with his feet. He was pretty shifty and pretty quick on his feet. He did a couple good throws off balance and running out of the pocket. He also had a few bad moments where he wasn't reading where the safeties were at and if they were going to come help the cornerbacks or not, and threw a couple bad passes deep. But for the most part, he threw the ball pretty well, pretty accurate middle and short passes. He kind of avoided pressure really well. And Jackson, you know, I believe from the moment when Spencer said he was coming that Jackson had a tail on his shoulders, but I knew he was going to be up for the challenge, and he looks really well. It was a few things that kind of resemble from last year. He first play, Michael Trick had a really good route run. He was open and Dart overthrew him. And a couple plays later, he kind of had a very short pass for a receiver that was open. So just a few small things, but Dart's feet look absolutely great. He's really quick. He was moving out of the pocket well. He knew when to scramble. He was getting down the slide really well. His pocket presence was well. He was throwing the ball, as we saw him last year, just kind of shifting it out with his arm like that, and it was just getting it out pretty accurate. So the competition is real. They all look well. They have flaws, of course, but it's going to be a battle.
My ranking that I've been keeping up all with during spring, this is the way I would put it right now. I got Jackson Dart as the number one. I think Walker Howard's the 2, and 3 is Spencer Sanders. Does that jive with what you saw?
It's weird because it was genuinely like a practice. They were doing drills for like a period or two, and then they would scrimmage and then do some more period drills. Spencer, and we've heard reports of this, he didn't look 100% healthy. It was kind of like he was like 70, 80% going full. And it was like, I feel like there's a lot more for him because we've seen it in the past with him at Oklahoma State but it just didn't seem like he really had it at this point yet. Walker, for me, it was him with his presence in the pocket. He did good stepping back, but he was also going right into sacks sometimes, stepping forward and kind of not really using his feet strongly to get out of the pocket and maybe get a scramble or dump it off. But Walker's arm was really strong. So I would say I would give Walker the edge over Spencer, I would say as well, just because of how his arm looked. And I would say Dart is the number one. Of course, he's had a year in this system already. He had a couple flaws as we saw last year, but he has the most potential for me. And I think you've said that as well. He has the abilities to do a lot on the football field, especially in a system that Lane wants to run. So I think Jackson is number one. It's weird with Spencer and Walker. I would go right now just to what I saw yesterday that Walker's probably number two just based off how he looked comfortably with his arm. If he can work on his feet, he'd definitely be number two. And Spencer, it depends on how 100% he wants to go or how he looks. He was kind of iffy. It was just kind of like he wasn't going 100%, and that may be based off an injury or I don't know what, but it was kind of just looking like he was trying to take a step back and not go fully yet.
Now, let's get off the quarterbacks just for a second. We've got that competition. It's kind of a status quo. They've done it all the way through it. But you also mentioned that the wide receiver, there was a bit too many drops. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, just a lot of open passes that were dropping. This wasn't a receiver, but they ran a play, and Ulysses Bentley was wide open, Steven. I mean, he was coming out the backfield, ran to the right, wide open. Caught it and started running, just dropped it. Didn't even really run. He just kind of caught it and just dropped it. And I'm watching Lane. Lane is right there behind him, and Lane is standing up, and Bentley drops it, and Lane just falls on the ground. And it's like, this is what we're practicing for so you don't make mistakes like this in real game time. Jalen Knox, who I believed has a lot of potential. He didn't look too well yesterday. A lot of good route running. His feet were quick, but he wasn't catching. He wasn't catching the ball at all, Steven. He had a lot of good route runs outside to the out of bounds area. Just wasn't finishing his play. And it was a lot of that. I think Michael Trigg maybe had a couple drops. And it was just a lot of running back options out to the outfield, and they just were dropping the ball. I think maybe just trying to get upfield too quickly. We're thinking about it too much, but they were just not fully catching the ball, and that's something to kind of be concerned about, but it's still early to not be, really talking about it too much.
All right, and before we move over to the defensive side of the ball real quick, were they using the middle of the field? You know how much I harp on the middle of the field. Was the middle of the field being used?
I would say in a sense it was a lot more than I saw last year. It wasn't a lot. They run a lot of plays where a lot of stack plays where Trigg may be going out or he's going up, taking a street upfield, or they, dropping it off to the running back on the outside or left or right. They did a lot with demanding getting the quarterbacks outside of the pocket. And I feel like when a pressure is coming on one of them when they're going outside the pocket, they tend not to look too deeply inside the middle of the field, and I don't know why that is. I would say it's a little bit more than last year, but it's still not a lot. And I understand what your point is in saying how attacking the middle of the field can not only help our passing game, but help running the football as well. But not a lot that I saw yesterday. Hopefully we can see a little bit more, but it was definitely a lot more than last year because it was hardly any effective play calling that was going down the middle because that could help spread out things as well.
All right, let's change sides of the ball real quick. What's your first impressions of the defense?
Oh, I love it, Steve. I love it absolutely. Pete, I was sitting all the way up top. I could hear Pete all the way from up top. He was aggressive. He was yelling. He was everywhere. He was jumping all over the place, and I love that. And I think the kids and these players need that. They need a guy that's going to hype them up. It's going to give them energy to go out there and play for play, give them 200% on the field. They ran, I don't know if this is the official word for this, but I call it swarm defense. And I'm from Arkansas, and I remember Barry Odin doing this a lot a couple years ago. Whenever, say, a receiver would catch the ball, there was 2, 3, 4 guys right there every single time. And that builds a lot of confidence in my head because it avoids a lot of broken tackles. you could have a receiver out there and he would be on one-on-one coverage, but safeties, linebackers, everybody was coming. There was 4 or 5 guys every single time a ball was touched on the outside. And I love that because that brings a lot of intensity that I think we lacked last year. We just didn't have a lot of confidence and intensity to keep going what we wanted to do. And something that a lot of people struggled with last year was our 3-man rush on the line. Pete's got 4. Pete's got 4, and it's just about every time that he's sending a lot of heat towards the quarterback based off yesterday. He usually only had 1 safety back there. Isheem Young looked pretty well. He kind of seemed like he wants to be the leader of this defense, and it's his senior year. I would like to see that out of him. A few flaws in terms of end zone defense, and that's what I was really concerned about, where we were going in the end zone. It didn't look to be like they were understanding where they needed to be and how to execute in the end zone quite yet, Stephen.
Yeah, and which, what are they, 4 or 5 practices in at this point, 6 practices? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's to be expected at this point. Now, whenever Pete Golding was at UTSA, and that is the film I like to go back to because everybody likes to point not going to have Alabama's players at Ole Miss. Okay, I'm going to look at UTSA, and I guarantee you we're going to have better players than UTSA. But that was an aggressive defense, like you just explained. Mm-hmm. It was very downhill, very aggressive. But the problem with that defense is it was susceptible to the counter. It was susceptible to the reversed. Anything that was misdirection. Do you think that might be a worry this early into spring?
I would say no. I think Pete has implemented what he wants from every single part of the defense, and I think it's going to take time, of course, but I think they are going to understand how this is going to help them be successful because a lot of new guys, not only just players, but we got a new safeties coach as well, and they're going to have to develop. It's just going to take connections and leadership within them to kind of build things. But I think Pete has set up a system very quickly, and he put out the X's and O's. This is what I want. This is what I want. And if we do this, there's no stopping us. But you got to listen. You have to be able to take it and use it out in the field, and you have to take advice and not take it too hard. You just have to take it with a piece of sense that we're trying to help you.
All right, so we're going to close out here with the standouts, and this is the rules for standouts. On the offensive standouts, only one of them can be a quarterback, so you have to pick another player besides a quarterback. On defense, it can just be any of 2 players. So offensively, who were your standouts from Saturday?
You want me to go quarterback first?
You can.
I'd honestly go Walker Howard, and I seriously mean that. And you guys will see this hopefully in a couple of weeks. His arm is pro ready, Stephen, and I can't emphasize that enough. It was quick, it was strong, it was accurate, and it was like he's been working on this his whole life, which I'm sure he has. He just looked like, he can make any throw on the field, and that's important for a quarterback. Even if he isn't the starter this year, that gives us and that gives Lane a sense of hopefulness after this season that we have a guy that can rocket the ball. And if he can improve just on the small things inside the pocket, there's no telling where this kid can go, honestly. I really believe that his arm is probably, can be one of the best in the country if he can just, keep developing what he's doing. My other standout would probably Michael Trick, to be quite honest with you. You've talked a lot about him recently, and maybe we should move him to a wide receiver position. He looked really well yesterday, really well. His route running was good. His hands are pretty good on the outside as well. He looked very quick, very, very quick. I saw taste of speed while we got to see him play last year for us, but not like I saw yesterday. He was getting upfield. He was pushing linebackers and cornerbacks around. He was getting upfield, and he was getting his hands in a position where I don't care how many guys are right here, I was going to make a catch, and he did that. And he looked really well, and I believe that could be something that's very special for us. I know that Dart and Trigg played at USC with each other, and if we can get that 1-2 connection going, I think that offense can be really dangerous.
All right, let's flip the side of the ball. 2 players defensively that were standouts.
First, I'm going to go John Sanders Jr. He's our transfer from Miami, Ohio. We lost a lot of cornerbacks in the transfer portal, and that's kind of scared me at the start, but we kind of got some more guys in. He looked really well, Steven. We didn't, and I'll say this, I didn't see a lot of press coverage from our defense yesterday, but he was stopping everything. Even if a receiver was coming inside for a slot play, his hands were there. He didn't miss any tackles. He was very quick. And he was just everywhere on the field. Like, I feel like even when a running back was coming out, he was there to stop the run. He was there to make an outside tackle when the running back was coming outside. He looked very quick. His feet look well. His vision of where the ball is and where it's going to, it looked really well. So that's who I would give my first one to. Second, I'll go another transfer, Jeremiah Jean Baptiste, our transfer from UCF. He looked really well. He's really big, and I say that he just looked like he was covering a lot of ground in the middle of the field. I remember Quinshawn had really one big open run and play, but other than that, he was there every single time to stop anything that was coming up the middle. He was reading the gaps really well. He was getting upfield to the quarterback really well. He had a couple of pass deflections that were coming across the middle as well. He looked really well. He looked comfortable in a system that's obviously new to him, and that's important for me, and that's important for fans to know because, again, we're just starting. It's still spring. They've had a couple practices. They haven't really got to a flow, and to see him look that comfortable was really awesome for me to say because – when you transfer here, that means you want to be here. And if you want to be here, that means you're going to give it your all. And he looked like he was giving it his all yesterday, and that meant a lot to me.
All right, Daylan Flowers comes on talking about the open practices at Ole Miss. He'll be there next Saturday. He'll be there for the Grove Bowl. Daylan's going to be doing this for us for the next couple of weeks. Hey, we might even be able to, whenever we have our unlisted live stream after the Grove Bowl, we might even be able to get him on for that. I don't know. But thank you very much, Daylan, for stopping by. Thanks for everything you've done. And thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, you get to hear from big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. It's Locked On College Basketball. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Daylan, thank you so much for stopping by. We'll catch back up with you next week, buddy.
Anytime, man. Thank you guys for having me. See you soon.
All right. Take care. Hotty toddy, bud.
Hotty toddy, man.